All right, and now we get to the co-main event of the evening with the so-called King of Miami and the UFC BMF champion returning to the octagon after the decision loss to Colby Chaos Covington in the hometown hero, so to speak, in Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. Coming into this fight with a record of 35 victories and 16 defeats, ranked number 11 in the UFC's 170-pound welterweight division, going up against another former title challenger coming off of a huge first-round submission over Neil Magny in Gilbert Durinho Burns, who is ranked number 5 in the division. This is the last run of Jorge Masvidal's career. Can he get a big win and finish off Durinho and prove to everybody why he was one of the most dangerous welterweights at one time? Or will Gilbert Burns take down Masvidal, get on top of him, and submit him into the history books? Burns versus Masvidal is a banger of a matchup, and the odds for this fight are completely and utterly disrespectful and ridiculous. I'm going to say that right now. There is no realm of possibility and no world where Gilbert Burns should be a minus 490 to a close to minus 500 favorite. That's absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense. At that point, you just take a shot on Masvidal because he has that one-hitter quitter ability. And we've seen Durinho and Gilbert Burns have issues with his chin. And we've seen him get knocked out before, even getting knocked out at lightweight by Dan Hooker, which is something I think people forget at this point in Durinho's career after all the fights he's been in. But I think this fight should be lined at the highest. You make Gilbert Burns a minus 225, minus 230. Everything over that is ridiculous, and we're over double that line in favor of Gilbert Burns, and there's no reason that it should be that way. But getting into the breakdown, we'll look at the stats quickly. Masvidal's obviously coming off that decision loss to Colby Covington, and then before that, the knockout loss to Kamaru Usman for the welterweight championship, the first time Masvidal had ever been knocked out in his career, and before that, a decision loss on short notice to Kamaru Usman at UFC 251 for the welterweight title. Looking at the height, 5'10 for Durinho Gilbert Burns, 5'11 for Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. So a 1-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage on the side of Gamebred as well. 71 inches for Gilbert Durinho Burns to 74 inches for Jorge Masvidal. Leg reach, I mean, it's only a half an inch advantage on the side of Burns, but the 3-inch reach advantage on the side of Jorge Masvidal is going to play a big factor, or it's going to be a big factor in this matchup when the fight plays out on the feet. Looking at the win percentages, you have a 72% finish rate for Gilbert Durinho Burns, compared to a 52% finish rate for Masvidal. So even though Masvidal is the bigger KO artist at a 46% knockout rate to a 29% knockout rate for Burns, Burns has a 43% submission finish rate compared to a 6% finish rate via submission for Masvidal. So it's pretty much knockout or decision on the side of Masvidal, to a lot of KOs and submissions, and a majority of those wins coming by way of sub for the Jiu-Jitsu black belt and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion in Gilbert Burns. Average fight time, you're going to be looking at 11 minutes and 16 seconds for Gilbert Burns to 13 minutes and 32 seconds on the side of Masvidal. Going into the significant strikes, we'll break that down pretty quick. 3.42 significant strikes landed per minute for Gilbert Burns to 4.11 for Masvidal. So Masvidal's a little bit more accurate, but it's pretty close, and they actually are neck and neck in terms of the significant strike accuracy rate, each coming in at a 48% significant strike accuracy. 3.17 strikes absorbed per minute for Gilbert Durinho Burns compared to 3.06 for Jorge Masvidal. So he takes ever so slightly a less amount of damage in terms of strikes on the feet, but it's neck and neck again, just like the strikes landed per minute are pretty neck and neck, and the significant strike accuracy rate is virtually identical. The defense is more on the side of Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, defending 64% of the strikes on the feet to 54% for Gilbert Durinho Burns. So Burns is more hittable. He gets hit with more shots and he takes more damage. When it comes to the grappling, that is going to be on the side of Gilbert Burns, because Masvidal uses his wrestling defensively all the time. He wants to keep it on the feet. He wants to make it a kickboxing fight, and he wants to piece you up and knock you out. 2.03 takedowns per 15-minute fight for Burns compared to 1.44 for Masvidal. Masvidal actually has a higher takedown accuracy rate, but he never really goes for takedowns, so that's something that you have to keep in mind with this number. 35% takedown accuracy rate for Gilbert Burns to 59% takedown accuracy rate for Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. Takedown defense, Gilbert Burns defends 47% of takedowns to a 74% takedown defense rate for Masvidal. So although I expect Gilbert Burns to have more of a grappling and jiu-jitsu based game plan coming into this fight against Jorge's not an easy guy to take down. And really the only takedowns in his career came to some of the best wrestlers in the division against Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. So take that 74%, even though it's higher than the takedown defense of Burns, take into consideration who was taking him down. I mean, Usman and Covington, the best wrestlers aside from Chimaev in the 170-pound division. Looking at the submission average, 0.63 on the side of Burns to 0.33 on the side of Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. So look, I expect Gilbert Burns to entertain this fight on the feet for as long as he can, but I do expect him to look to shoot takedowns, push Jorge Masvidal up against the cage, work the head on the inside single, transition to the body lock, look to trip the inside or outside trips against Masvidal, take him down, get him to scramble, take his back, flatten him out, and look to ground and pound and submit him. He's going to be looking to take down Jorge and, work from the top position, look to control him, kind of like the Wonderboy Thompson fight. Gilbert Burns wasn't really effective in terms of striking with Wonderboy on the feet, but the minute he pushed him up against the cage, used his long rangy punches to close the distance, the looping overhands and the straight punches to push Wonderboy up against the cage and work for those double legs, the body locks, the single legs, the head on the inside, single transition to the head on the outside, move to the body lock and work the trips, work the head on the inside single, cut the corner, take him down, and look to scramble and wind up on top position, whether it was in the half guard, side control, or the full mount. Gilbert Burns is going to have a primarily grappling heavy approach in this fight, but a lot of people are expecting that Jorge Masvidal is just going to get taken down, get suffocated, get finished with ground and pound, or get submitted. Do you remember that the last time Jorge Masvidal got submitted was against Tobi Imada with a standing triangle, and that was back before he was even in the UFC? That was over a decade ago. Jorge Masvidal is not an easy guy to submit. The only thing that I think Gilbert Burns is going to have an advantage is if he's able to secure takedowns, if he's able to hold Masvidal up against the cage, if he's able to constantly take him down. Even if Masvidal works up to the feet, his volume and overall output on the feet, if he's getting out wrestled, is going to significantly decrease over those 15 minutes. Once he starts getting taken down, once he starts getting controlled up against the cage, he kind of has that mental defeat in him where he'll start to really, really decrease his volume and not throw combinations, not look to push forward, really just look to go into that defensive state of mind. And I think that's what Burns is going to be looking to accomplish here, because let me tell you, in a striking matchup on the feet with primarily boxing and kickboxing, it's basically 50-50, but I would actually go about 65-35 on the side of Jorge Masvidal. He's better technically. He has the sharper strikes. I think he has more knockout power than Durinho. Even though the power is pretty similar, I think with the technique that Masvidal has, that adds to the power he's able to generate in those strikes. And the stance switching combinations can give Burns some issues. I think Masvidal has this fight in the bag if it stays on the feet. I'm going to be honest. I know Burns has big power. He actually has a lot more technical striking than I originally thought when I went and broke the tape down. But on the feet, man, this is more on the side of Jorge Masvidal than the odds would ever suggest. And that's why I think that this line is so disrespectful. Like, I really can't believe they have Burns at basically a 5-1 favorite against a guy who has a knockout ability and is going to be the sharper technical fighter when it comes to the striking, the kickboxing, and the boxing game. His left hook is unbelievable. The only thing is Gilbert Burns has a good left hook as well, but I think pairing it up in combination would more go to the side of Jorge Masvidal. But the left hook on Gilbert Burns, I mean, he dropped Damian Maia with it. He caught Chimaev with it a couple times, but he got caught with his own left hook a bunch of times. Like, the only thing that I think when I really break it down in terms of striking is not only is Jorge more technical, not only is he sharper, not only is he more dangerous in terms of the striking, in my opinion, but he's also going to be the guy who, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say, but either way, we'll continue. I think that when you look at it overall, I think that the weapons that Gilbert Burns is effective with on the feet, even though he has probably more power in terms of one-shot striking ability, the technical ability of Masvidal and the technique of Jorge is sharper in terms of the striking. He has issues with stance-changing combinations. We've seen him get dropped with a southpaw jab from Usman, get hurt from southpaw multiple times. We've seen Masvidal use stance switch or feint stance switch combinations to knock out the likes of Darren Till. We saw Chimaev drop Burns with a southpaw jab. He has some issues when opponents switch stance, and I think if Burns stays primarily in orthodox, we're going to see Masvidal use those stance switch combinations to set up the power left kick to the body. Masvidal has a beautiful ability to work the body with round kicks, and we've seen it showcased in the fight with Nate Diaz. We saw it showcased in the fight against Darren Till. We've seen it showcased in the fights with Donald Cerrone. He can also catch kicks extremely well, sweep them across like a Thai-style kick catch sweep, and then follow up with the left hook off the same side that he completed the sweep with. By catching the kick and sweeping it across, you're going to square up the opponent's hips and make them parallel to you, which is going to leave them in the exact direction of the left hook on the same side. So parry, sweep across, square up the opponent's hips, boom, left hook. That can hurt Gilbert Burns if he decides to work the kicks, but I think the kicks to the body and low kicks and high kicks are more going to come from the side of Masvidal. I think that Burns has gotten better in terms of his technical striking ability, but if he wants to win this fight, he's going to be looking to wrestle. He's going to be looking to push Masvidal up against the cage early, control him, and even if he breaks away from the takedowns, I think he's going to be looking for Masvidal to really decrease the volume, which is going to up the confidence of Burns in the striking game on the feet and allow him to put more volume together and potentially hurt Jorge, because coming off of a knockout loss, even though that wasn't his last fight, but the second to last fight, that's going to be in the head of Masvidal, and he got knocked out by a guy who he had never been knocked out before. And Colby Covington, I mean, he hurt Colby with an overhand like right hook as he closed the distance. Boom, bam, he's able to slip his head off the center line, move his head. Jorge's very good defensively, and he has a very good counter game. And I think people forget just because of the recent losses he's had, but they came to the top of the division in the upper echelon in the likes of Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington, who also coincidentally are the best wrestlers in the division. So Gilbert Burns, I don't think, is going to be as effective with being able to take down Jorge. And it's not so much holding him down, because I think he would be more successful holding him down. It's being able to get in on the hips and actually take Masvidal down, because he has been historically difficult to take down unless you are the upper echelon of the division. And that's not what Burns is. Burns is the upper echelon of the division in terms of jiu-jitsu, not in terms of actual wrestling and amateur wrestling. And that's what you have to take into consideration when breaking the fight down. I actually like the side of Masvidal. I think I've seen Burns have durability issues. I've seen him get caught. We saw in the Chimaev fight, he was able to push through, got dropped, pushed through, even dropped Chimaev. The Magny fight was kind of a gimme fight for Burns because he was able to just take him down and submit a guy who's been taken down and submitted multiple times in his career. And once he gets put in those submissions, Neil Magny just kind of gives up and doesn't try to fight to get out of it as much. And that's not a knock on Magny. That's just what I've seen in terms of the tape study. But I think the striking game of Masvidal, the takedown defense, I think Burns has some chin issues that just haven't been exploited too much recently, even though he got through the fights with Chimaev after getting dropped and even dropped Chimaev. I mean, he's had issues, got knocked out at lightweight. He's been hurt in those fights. He got hurt by Chimaev, but was able to get through it. If he gets hurt by Masvidal, I don't think he's going to be able to survive. And I'm actually going to go with the big underdog here. I'm going to go with Jorge Masvidal to come back in his UFC return and get the win via a knockout victory. I think he's going to catch Burns with a stance switch combination, a stance switch or stutter step overhand, and hurt him, drop him, and TKO him. So I'm going to go with Jorge Gamebred Masvidal to be successful in his return and in his hometown of Miami, Florida, and defeat the number 5 ranked Gilbert Durinho Burns via a second round knockout. He's going to catch him with a stance switch combination, hurt him over the top. And I don't necessarily think he'll jump on him, because I don't think he's going to want to even give Burns a chance to work his jiu-jitsu, whether it's from the top or the bottom position, and try to get a half guard sweep or something like that. So forget about jumping on him. I think he's actually going to knock him out cold. He's going to hurt him, have Burns guard up, high guard, stay in a stationary position. He's going to try to counter. Masvidal's going to slip the counter of Gilbert Burns come back with a right hand, left hook, stand switch combo, hurt him, boom, drop him against the fence, and the ref's going to jump in. So my pick is Jorge Gamebred Masvidal to defeat the number 5 ranked Gilbert Duranio Burns via a second round knockout in his return to the UFC and in his hometown of Miami, Florida. From a betting perspective, you either take the under 2.5 rounds or you take Masvidal as the underdog at a juicy plus 390.